Okay, so now we're going to go over the sutures of the skull. We have our coronal suture, our sagittal suture, our lambdoid suture, which is right here, and then we have our squamous suture. This one here, and those are the sutures for the skull. Okay, so for the frontal bone, we only have the supraorbital foramen, which are these parts right here, and then our coronal suture, this region right here. Okay, so now we're going to go over the facial bones as a whole. We're going to start off with the maxillae, which is this part right here. We have the mandible, which actually comes at the bottom. You can kind of see it on this one. The mandible is this one right here. And then we're going to have the palatine bone, so you can only see under the maxillae, which are these yellow-orange ones. And then we're going to have the zygomatic bones, these light orange ones. We have the lacrimal bones, you can see on the inside, which are these purple ones that are in front of your ethmoid bone. Then we're going to move on to the inferior nasal conchae, which are these parts right here. They're on the inside. You can see it on the lateral sides. Then you're going to move on to the vomer, which you can kind of see. Okay, now we're going to move on to the vomer, which you can see a little bit from this angle, but you can see it a little bit more clear from the bottom. It sits actually in the middle of the sphenoid bone. And that concludes the facial bones of the skull. Okay, so now we're going to go over the maxillae. We're going to have the alveolar margin, and then we're going to have the process of the maxillae, just this region right here. Then we have the infraorbital foramen, this foramen right here, right under the orbits. And then we have the palatine process, this part right here, and the incisive fossa, which you can see this little divot right here. And that sums up the maxillae. Okay, so now we're going to go over the mandible. We're going to start off with the alveolar margin and processes, which are this parts right here. We have the mental foramen right here. Then we have the mandibular condyle, this part right here. We have the coronoid process, this one right here. The body of the mandible is actually considered the whole thing. Then we have the mandibular ramus, which is this part right here. We have the angle of the mandible, this part right here. And on the interior side, you're actually going to see the mandibular foramen, this part right here, which you can see on both sides. And that sums up your mandible. Okay, so for the sphenoid bone, you have your greater wing, your lesser wing, your sella turcica, your optic canal, and then you have your foramen lacerum, just this one right here. You have your foramen ovale, foramen spinosum, and foramen rotundum. From there on, you have your superior orbital fissure, which can be seen right here. And then in front of the skull, you can see the inferior one, this part right here. And then you have your pterygoid processes, which are actually these right here. You have your lateral and your medial, which can also be seen under the skull, right here. These ones right here. Okay, so for the occipital bone, you have the lambdoid suture. Then you have the occipital condyles. So right here, you have the foramen magnum. And then right under the condyles, you have your hypoglossal canal. Okay, so we're going to go over the hyoid bone. You're going to have the body of the hyoid. You're going to have the lesser horn, this one right here. And then you have the greater horn right here. And that sums up your hyoid bone. Okay, so we're going to go over the vertebrae. We have our atlas, our axis, our cervical, our thoracic, and our lumbar. We're going to go over the parts of the vertebrae. We have the body, which you can see in all of them. And then we're going to go to the vertebral foramen, this region right here. Then we're going to go to the transverse process and foramen. The transverse process is actually going to be these are considered kind of like the ears. On this one's going to be this one right here. And then for the spinous process, they're these right here. Then for the superior articular process, they're these right here. This one, or these as well. Then moving on to the inferior articular process, you're actually going to see them at the bottom. They're these right here. Okay, so now we're going to go over the inferior articular process, which is the inferior side on this part right here. For the thoracic, it's this one. For the cervical, it's that one. For the axis, it's this one, as well as for the atlas. Then we're going to go over the lamina, which you can see on the superior part. This one right here. This part right here. And this part right here. As far as the pedicle, it's actually going to be where the body connects. This part right here. Oops, this part right here. And the neck for the praying man.